Hey everybody, Jeremy Graves here with Pivot Group. How are you? We certainly hope that you are well and or certainly as well as you could be under the circumstances. We're really excited to finally be coming to you guys with some content regarding getting back to work or some normalcy in our operations. And so we're going to go through a guide for returning to the workplace post COVID-19. Our teams have been working on some great content already, and we're really excited that we're finally able to start thinking about that. Now, we know some of you may have never left the office. Some of you may have still have everybody there, but you just closed the door to customers. So wherever you are in that process, hopefully some of these things will be beneficial to you. So what we're going to do is to go through 6 steps that can help you get to that place. And maybe these 6 will only be food for thought, right? Or they may just spur some thoughts or conversations internally as you begin to get to that place. So let's go ahead and dive in. The first step that we want to talk about is getting a work group together. Now, I'm already imagining eyes rolling with this because we probably already have so many groups at work. Now, you may already have a group like this put together that you can just say, okay, this is going to be our return to work task force. But ideally what happens is we've got people who are representing every department that are part of this. And these representatives do not need to be managers or supervisors necessarily. So dig deep into the organization because there will be people who want to have their voice heard here, and that's going to be important to let them share that. Those voices should be speaking into our strategy for returning to work. They should be speaking into how we communicate with our staff and also with our customers. Because remember, we may be talking about 2 things individually. We may be talking about just opening the doors back for our staff, and then we may be talking about opening the doors for our customers as a secondary step. And so these folks need to speak into that strategic direction. The other key thing they're going to do here is to create some buy-in. Your message with them is now going to cascade into the organization, and we have to have this group to buy into this, and then because we need them to be selling it internally, in a very authentic and sincere way. And so if they feel like their voices have been a part of this, then that will happen more naturally. The other thing about this group is they're going to be thinking about things that you won't. And so none of us as leaders are going to have every answer to every question or to be thinking about every nuance or situation that could occur because it may have been a long time since we were in some of those frontline roles. So this group is really going to help us think about the things that we're not thinking about on our own. So that's step 1. Hopefully you'll be able to get that group together pretty easily. Now, step 2 is about thinking through a phased approach to return. Now, this graphic I'm apologizing for. It's pretty gross to look at, and so sorry about that. But the phased approach needs to look at things like who needs to return to the office right now. So if we're just making the assumption that our kind of a reopen is just about getting our staff back in the office, think about who are those people that really need to come back now. Now, you've probably had some folks who never left, which may be the most essential of the essential. Who is that next group now that you would say we would want to bring in? After that, who would we say could return later? And what might that time frame look like? Or what key markers are we going to try to put into place so that we can see if we should have those folks return at that specific date? We might also ask the question, maybe we don't even need to have some people return. I mean, for years and years and years, we felt like everybody has to be in the office, or most of us have. We might now say, no, we can certainly operate where people are working from home. What are those guidelines? What could they look like? And who are those folks? Could we have tech support people now working from home, customer service working from home? And then listen, as a leader, as you begin to think about, now my applicant pool could grow so much larger because I'm not necessarily having to limit myself to the people in our community. And that could be a good thing, but these questions are essential to ask internally. Now you go that next step and say, maybe we have people who don't want to return. Now, certainly people want to go back to work, right? But you'll have people who might say, I don't want to come back into the office. I'm too concerned about doing that. And so how do we identify those people? How do we ask those questions? Maybe we have already asked. Or do we create some type of survey so that we can get some responses from people to figure out who those people are? Again, this phased approach is all part of the overall strategy for reopening. Now, this phased approach may just be talking about your internal employees, but another part of the phased approach could be, how do we begin to let customers back in the door? And when do we allow customers to come back in the door? So all of that is part of step 2, which is the phased approach to reopening. Now, lastly, on this step, before we move on, we need to think about testing. I have heard that there are several organizations that what they do is they have somebody at their door and they are taking temperatures before people walk back in the door. So what type of testing do we want to engage with? Maybe there's nothing, but think about that, because you may have staff members that say, how is my organization making sure that I am safe from the potential COVID virus? And so we need to think about that, because your employees will be thinking about that. Let's move to step number 3. This is about workplace assessment. Now look at this picture for a second. We need to think about, how do we need to redesign our work areas? Are our desks too close together? Do we need to put up some type of plexiglass in front of our customer service teams as they're engaging with folks? We're seeing that all over the place. And so what changes need to occur? Who's going to be responsible for those? And what's the plan for making it happen? Does our reception area need to change? Now, I walked into my broadband provider recently. I had to get a new modem and router, and they had those dots on the floor that said where I needed to stand and not to move. And then when I engaged with the customer service rep, there were certain things that had changed in terms of handing me items or change on a tray so that we're not physically touching. And then also how that communication needs to occur, which we'll talk about that in a minute. But think about those reception areas, because you want your team to be safe, but we also need to make sure we're thinking about the safety of our customers and members. Now, we have forever gotten together as larger groups, staff meetings, team meetings, department meetings. What are we going to do to collaborate in those environments? Are we going to still use online collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams or Zoom or any of the handful of others that are there? Or are we going to get into rooms like this, but make sure that we have social distancing protocols in place where there are chairs, 1 or 2 chairs between each person, so that we're not too close? So we need to think about that ongoing collaboration as step 3. Now, the last 3 that we want to talk about, the first one here at step 4 is safety protocols. We all have protocol guidelines. All of you probably have a safety manual or handbook someplace. Does it need to be updated? And that's a question to you that insinuates there is a yes answer. The CDC has new guidelines that we need to all be aware of, and you may need to put those new guidelines into your safety manual. Now, they may only be there temporarily until kind of some of this passes, but you do need to look at those and to update your manuals. Maybe new safety protocols where we think about, what do we do if a staff becomes sick or tests positive, or what if a customer does? And you may only know that from a friend of a friend or a family member, or see on social media where someone has tested positive, and then a staff member says, hey, they were just in the office 2 days ago. What are we going to do? How are we going to try to ensure the safety of our employees? So those are all part of your safety protocols that are important during this step. We also have to think about the implementation of social distancing. Now, that's part of the CDC guidelines. But taking that to the next step of saying, what are we going to do when and if we have staff members who are not following those guidelines? Are we going to bring them in? Is that a strike 1, strike 2 type of offense? How are we going to communicate that? Because, we all know people who are saying, oh, we're all just kind of going crazy with this. We don't need to be social distancing. And you have other people that are wearing masks in their home, right? So you've got people on both sides of that spectrum. Now you're going to be bringing those people all back together into the office. And so we have to make sure that these guidelines are being adhered to by everyone, that these are not choices that people get to make just on their own. And so what are we going to do when people don't make those? Lastly, as far as this protocol, you guys know for years in your break rooms, you've always posted, any safety updates that need to be there. Maybe we take this to the next step here, or to the next level, and we begin to openly advertise these protocols everywhere and bigger than probably ever before. And you can still do that in a way that doesn't look, really bad. You see this COVID-19 sign here. Think about if a customer walked in the door and they now see this, they're going to immediately begin to feel better and at ease because they know that you're taking all of this seriously. So if you need any help with any of those, creating any of those posters or banners or things like that, please just feel free to reach out to us. We'd be happy to support you in any way. Now let's move to step 5. This is about the communication and training plan. So now assume you've gotten 1 through 4 completed. How are we going to share this information with our staff, and then how are we going to teach it to them? The first part of any communication plan, in my opinion, is just total transparency with your team. Talk more about transparency in a few minutes. In your communication, and remember, listen, we're a marketing agency. We know that to be able to communicate effectively, you need to be able to do it multiple times with multiple tactics. And so you've got to make sure that we're thinking about getting it out in a variety of ways, but then also allowing people to provide feedback to you also in a variety of ways. And one of those ways should probably be an anonymous survey to let people respond to you and say, hey, I'm agreeing with you or not agreeing with you, or have you thought about this or that? And that feedback loop is always important. We do that with our customers. We need to do that with our teams as well. Remember, this is all about employee experience here, right? We want them to participate in the process and to have a voice into this. Now, we also can communicate, which is part of it, but we also now need to teach people, how do we adhere to these new safety protocols? Social distancing to some people might just mean I'm not going to hug you or shake your hands, while other people maybe, no, you have to be exactly 6 feet away, and they pull their tape measure out to make sure that nobody is, within 6 feet. And so you need to set the expectation for what these mean. So communicating is great, but make sure that you're taking the time to teach and educate folks on your expectations so that everybody is completely clear. And you may just create some videos for people internally so that they know exactly what you want. Lastly, you should also then go the next step and say, how should our team be communicating those to customers who possibly walk in the door? I have gone into places that are engaging me as a customer really effectively and with empathy and with poise and with care and concern. I've also gone into organizations which come across mean and angry and hateful because they're fearful, and that's obviously not the direction that we want to go. So teaching your teams what to say and how to say it during this time is critical. Okay, so from our communication and training plan now, let's go into our last step. And again, there are probably 100 steps. We just wanted to bring a few for you guys to begin thinking about. Step 6 is all about preparing for change. So we all know we can go down a certain path. We don't know what the future is going to look like. We don't know if the numbers are going to grow or if they're going to decline. We may have to shift right back to where we were, or we may need to expedite things because things have gotten so much better. So wherever you are, just make sure the new things that you are implementing, new policies, new procedures, monitor those daily, because if they change, that's going to tell you whether or not you need to make a U-turn. And part of monitoring is about hearing from your staff and being super responsive to how they feel about these things. Now, you may have a team of folks who are trying to create new policies or procedures or processes with all the best intentions in the world, but your team may feel differently. You're going to have staff who are on both sides of the coin. Some, they don't know anybody that's been affected. Others, you may have somebody who they've lost somebody to this. So they're going to be sensitive. There's going to be a variety of sensitivities. So just be responsive to those. Don't dismiss them. It's going to be really important to the overall success of this. stay away from definitive statements as you are creating this plan. Meaning, don't paint yourself in a corner, right? Don't say something that you can't get out of. And because we don't know how this is going to turn out, we just need to make sure that people understand, here's where we are today. As things change, we will probably need to make other changes and adjustments, and we all need to be on board with that. So even though this is where we are today, expect us to make some changes. And so if you go into a plan with expected changes, it'll make it that much easier when you get to that point, because we all know that you will have to adjust. Now, last part of step 6 is make sure people know when those changes occur. How are you going to communicate that to your team? Now, that should also be part of your communication plan in step 5 is, we're communicating this to you, but when something does adjust, these are the 3 ways in which we're going to send that out so we can get it to you quickly, because some of those changes may impact customers and we're going to need them to communicate with customers. You guys have been communicating with customers fantastically well. And so obviously that can't stop. And so that's what you're there to do. We're here to help you in that process too if you need us. So let's just recap quickly. Guidelines for returning to work. Create that return to work group. It should be a phased approach, not just for staff, but also for customers. Do a deep dive into assessing all of those things that you need to around the workplace. We may even have been at a place where, we have to adjust how many people go into the restroom at a time and how many people can be in the break room at a time. All of those things should be part of that step 3. Step 4 is your safety protocols. And I added here cleaning protocols too, because I know as a customer, I'm going to feel better if I know you are cleaning more than you ever have before, and or having your staff go and wipe doors down or wipe your desks off, or even customers seeing you do that. Maybe you're asking your cleaning folks to come in twice as often during this time. So revising protocols, but also your cleaning protocols. Number 5 is your communication and training plan, which we just spoke about, and then preparing for those plans to change. Okay, hopefully those have been helpful to you. Just want to add a few final thoughts as we conclude for today. You have been going through and you have been managing this madness in some cases as well as you possibly can. And it's been crazy for all of us. We're having to do things we never thought we would have to do. And so take a few minutes, just pat yourself on the back and know that, okay, it looks like we may be nearing the end of this. Now, I know people think differently and it could spike back. We're at least at this place now where we're easing some restrictions. Some of us are just getting back to work a little bit more normally than we have been. So we've kind of gotten to where we need to be, and I'm excited about where we are at this point. But I want to conclude with just a few final thoughts for today. The first is our team's perception is going to be reality, and the perception of our customers is going to be their reality. Don't leave anything up for their perception to be different than what it should be. Okay? Communicate as often as you possibly can. Make sure that they are perceiving things the way that they're intended. Now, that's a really difficult thing to do, but their perception is going to be reality. So just don't leave anything up as a question mark. Try to address everything you can and be as clear as you can, which is why the next step here, let's talk about transparency being essential. Transparency is just letting people know, here's what we know now. We're going to share as much as we possibly can as we continue down this path. Just don't leave anything out there that you're not sharing with people that you should be. Transparency is essential with your team, and we should all be doing that as often as we can. Lastly here is just about common sense, and let common sense prevail. Sometimes we do things that just might not make sense under normal circumstances. So just, ask yourself that question. Does this make sense? And if you don't think it does, don't go down that path or get somebody else's opinion on this. Just think about the perception, think about transparency, and think about just making sure that we are making decisions that are just based on good old common sense. So hopefully this has been helpful. Again, we're just trying to bring some information to you that could help along the way. If there is anything else that we can possibly do for you, that is what we're here for. Please let us know. We're going through this as well. We're having these same conversations in our organization, so hopefully they'll help you along the way. Let me just end by saying thank you for allowing us to help. Thanks for letting us be part of this process with you. That's what we're here for, and we wish you all nothing but the best as we get back to normal.